Now.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Schleicher, and I'm blessed to be the Secretary of the NLSA National Accreditation Commission. Today, I have the privilege of introducing today's webinar entitled Security and Emergency Readiness, which will also highlight some things within the Raptor program. Today's webinar will feature powerful practices at Peace Lutheran School in Saginaw, Michigan. This webinar was presented by the staff at Peace and is being produced by Concordia University, Wisconsin's Office of Continuing and Distance Education. We thank our colleagues at Concordia for their leadership and support in this endeavor. Just a couple things about webinars in general. First off, live webinars are participatory events, and so we appreciate your questions and comments. Feel free to express yourself by typing in the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And all of the webinars presented this year are available on demand through the NLSA tab on the luth.ed.org website, and also through the LCMS School Ministry YouTube channel. If you like what was shared here today, we invite you to view a recorded webinar together with your faculty as a great opportunity for professional development. Another great resource for Lutheran schools is the LCMS School Ministry Facebook page. Our Facebook page provides another opportunity for our schools to connect informally. We invite you to share your encouraging stories on the LCMS School Ministry Facebook page. All that being said, let's begin our webinar with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we give thanks and praise to you for the opportunity to serve you in Lutheran schools. We thank you especially for Peace Lutheran School in Saginaw, Michigan. We thank you for blessing this school with a fantastic staff who work hard to draw children and their families into a closer relationship with our Savior, Jesus Christ. We ask that you would continue to shower your blessings upon Peace. Give the staff all that they need to teach the students entrusted to their care. And finally, Lord, we ask that you be with those who will be presenting in this webinar. Specifically, Lord, we just ask you to be with Joel. And we ask that all that would be done here would be done to your glory, and it would equip other schools for future service to you. And we ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen. With that, we welcome Joel Koip from Peace Lutheran School in Saginaw, Michigan, as he shares with us the webinar entitled Security and Emergency Readiness and highlights the Raptor program.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be with all of you across the country and hopefully across the world this evening. In preparing for this, it was something that my principal came to me and kind of dropped in my lap and said, Joel, guess what? You get to do a webinar based on our previous NLSA accreditation, and I gladly accepted it, a little begrudgingly. But I'm happy to share with you things that we do here at Peace Lutheran School, and hopefully you can glean, if only one thing, that's much better than nothing at all. So as we begin, just wanted to give you a little information about myself. First of all, well, take that back. I'm going to see if I can get my slides to advance here. Todd, are you still there?
I am here.
All right, Todd. My slides.
In the bottom left.
Oh, there we go.
There you
I
go.
see it now. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
No worries. Sure.
All right. But anyway, a little about myself. Been 21 years in the ministry, in the teaching ministry, 16 years here at Peace Lutheran School. And in terms of all that, started off serving as a classroom teacher. I still am a classroom teacher, but also an administrator in various forms. And most recently, have been blessed to serve in the role of Director of Facilities and Safety here at Peace Lutheran. My role here at Peace is to be responsible for all facilities maintenance, facilities development in terms of new projects, as well as church and school safety. We do have 2 campuses in the city of Saginaw. So that's a little bit of my background. If you do notice here, I do not have any degrees necessarily in facilities and safety. And so everything that I have learned has come along the way through people who are the professionals, people who I've taken information from, sources that have had this information, and just kind of been responsible for putting it all into practice and use here at Peace Lutheran. So as we go forward here, my approach, first of all, I think that when it comes to school safety and security, I think there is kind of a five-fold approach to thinking about school safety and security. First and foremost, one of the things that I don't think of is great, what can we get and what can we put in? Instead, I think about what can we actually control? Because everything with security and safety does go into those two categories, what you can control and what you cannot control. And obviously doing your best to prepare in both of those realms. Things that you can control are physical items, equipment, and any type of maintenance. Also, what can be controlled are all of your policies and your procedures. But then there are things you can't control. Those are things that you think about. What could you be prepared for? And if you really do give yourself time to think about it, the possibilities for what you can't control are quite endless. Nonetheless, thinking about those possibilities does give you a sense of what more you can control. And it really does require a certain level of rationality. In the end, you could go gung-ho on anything and everything that could happen, but you do have to be rational about it too. What is rational that could happen for us? Third approach is, once you've identified those items, is to really dive in deep and to utilize the experts you have around you. Again, there are very few people that go through school and get that degree and go out into the school communities and stay at a school and say, I am a school safety and security expert. They just aren't there. Nonetheless, there are lots of people and lots of places that you can gain this information. Research yourself. A lot of the research that I get is through articles, news clippings. I talk a lot with our local law enforcement. We're blessed here in Saginaw, as I would guess is probably the case across the country, that you have some type of law enforcement involvement in your community. People who are school resource officers who dedicate themselves to being in each school and helping those schools prepare for the what ifs. And lastly, the experts do happen to be vendors. Although they are often out there to sell you a product, I have found that many of them do actually have the intent of helping you be as safe as you can actually be. All three of those groups do help you to go back to items 1 and 2, help you to identify things you can control and things you cannot control. The fourth way we have approaching a school safety and security is obviously gaining support. It's one thing to be alone in your office or in a room of a few select people and to come up with all these policies, procedures, and measures. But if you don't have the support of your stakeholders, it's not going to go well for you. We have found that out in a few instances the hard way. And so what we have changed is gaining support with our stakeholders, parents, and students, as well as the local community. The last one is what I think people often think about as a roadblock to school safety and security. And the more you take a look through the community, even at the state and federal levels, there is still a lot of opportunity for funding there. So it's my hope to bring those things to you this evening as we go through the rest of the presentation. My goal with going through this presentation is to just show some of the things that we do here at Peace Lutheran. I am not advocating necessarily that every single school do this. It's just items that we have found here at Peace Lutheran that work well for us, are also items that work for our stakeholders, and are items that we can actually afford at this point in time. So we're always open to suggestions. If you see something or know of something I don't have listed here, I would love to hear from you tonight, and I'll put my contact information at the end of the presentation. One of the first ways, or one of the first things I look at in terms of our building as a first level of safety, is access to our building. And that's not just necessarily staff getting in and out, but who has access and what level of access do they get to our building. One of the things that we have found, unfortunately, that leads to a lot of problem is actually physical keys. And we've done our best to get rid of the physical keys as much as possible, really only issuing keys for the interior spaces of the building. The exterior of the building only has a few keys that are given out, first of all to high-level administration and also to first responders. One of the things that we do is often, actually we have developed, is not only to keep them to a minimum, but we also log our keys. And I will tell you, being a principal for a while, understanding that on top of everything that you do as that administrator on a daily basis, keeping a log of keys is a tedious task. And so to some extent, I've had my office staff help out with logging keys and keeping a running log, as well as checking that log on a semi-frequent basis, making sure that keys that were checked out a year ago or 2 years ago are still out for a valid reason. And if not, to make sure that we've gotten a contact out to the person that has those keys and asking them either politely to return the keys or confirming that they do in fact still need those keys. But that brings me to my second point. If I can at all minimize a physical key, which is so easily copied, we have implemented a system, and I'm guessing that many other schools use key fobs and key codes. Those items, again, allow us to more easily track not only who has those fobs and codes, but at any point in time, without having to ask for a fob or a code back, we can, of course, electronically disable that and therefore disable their access to the building. It also helps us to monitor who is entering the building at any point in time using their fob or code. That has a lot to do with after hours access too. Because we do have a lot of community groups that use our school, instead of giving out keys to people in the community we may have a very light relationship with, it does give us that ability to give them a code that works only at certain times of the day. And then of course, the ability to turn off that code once their time or their use at peace is finished. One of the other things we do too is we have intercom systems. I think many schools do have intercom systems to some extent. These intercom systems are a way of communicating between that locked door. Our school doors, at least on the exterior, are locked 24/7. And so when people come to the building, one of the first levels is to screen our visitors through the use of a video intercom system. In the K-8 section of our building, that intercom system does go to our main office. However, in our early childhood section of our building, we do have video intercom systems that go to each of the classrooms. That way, after hours pickup of students whose parents may be coming in the evening, they can go to the door, which is still locked, but they can access their child's classroom by making that video phone call and connection with that child's teacher to allow them access to the building. One of the last things that we also have done, and we realized over the years that, boy, once people did get buzzed in to that first set of doors through the building, we did have a sign that said, please check into the school office before going into the rest of the building. And of course, I think probably many people have that sign and find parents still seem to bypass that front office to check in and of course know exactly where they're going. One of the things that we did to limit that is to create something called a man trap. There is probably a more effective or technical name for them, but we call them man traps. And in one of the pictures in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that the gentleman in the background is at that first entry point. He has been buzzed into the building after being outside. And of course, we have a staff member who is walking towards the door. That is our office door. And she is walking toward a third set of doors, and those doors are controlled by the office. That way, if parents do want to or wish to bypass the office, they are not getting any further until they stop in at the office, check in, and the office allows them to continue on into the rest of the building where the students and staff are located. So those are some of the things that we have in our building and items that we use in terms of access to the building. Getting my cursor down here to go on to the next page. In terms of our visitors, we do utilize a system called Raptor from Raptor Technologies. I will tell you right away that Raptor is not the only technology that is out there. It's just a technology that we happen to research. We believed that it was very beneficial to what our needs were. And so we embarked on using that technology, and it's been in place for about 3 years now. We absolutely love the capabilities of this system. We use both the Raptor system for both our visitors and our students. And we also use Raptor. I don't have it listed, but we use it for our volunteers in the building. The premise of the Raptor system is that all of our visitors, upon entry to the building, are required to stop and check in at either our early childhood or our K-8 offices, which are located on two different ends of the building. And when they stop in at the office, we have trained all of our visitors to present or be ready to present their driver's license. It doesn't matter which state the driver's license is from, or it could be a government issued ID. What we do then is, using the Raptor system, we scan that ID or that driver's license, and it automatically, Raptor Technologies will do this, automatically scan a national database for known felons as well as criminal sex offenders. If there is a hit, as we've scanned a person's card, automatically Raptor, and the way that we've set it up, notifies the administrators in the building that a known sex offender or a felon is attempting to enter our building. We have further policies in place then that the office staff is to hold or to delay those visitors until one of the administrators can get to the office and meet with that person. Not every sex offender is necessarily denied access in our policy. We understand that sometimes there may be situations where sex offenders may also be the parents of our students. We're not saying that that's the case, but we're saying that's something we are prepared to deal with, and that we have to have a discussion with that parent or that person prior to them entering the building, and have certain procedures and steps in place for monitoring their time in the building, where they can be and who they can be with. What's nice about Raptor is we also have the ability to include local authorities in this alert. At any time, we can enter the phone number of our local authorities so that they also get an alert, if we wish, that a known sex offender or a felon is attempting to gain access to our building, at which point they have the opportunity to respond. Right now, we have made sure that we have the ability to screen that person first before making that phone call to authorities if needed. One of the things that we also use the Raptor system for is for our students. The nice thing about this Raptor system is that when students arrive late in the morning, or if they're tardy to school, or if they've had a doctor's appointment, we do have our students loaded into the Raptor system. And when students arrive at school, we check them in with the Raptor system. It does issue us a badge for the student that they can turn in, or a ticket per se, that is printed out, and the student can take that down to the teacher and present it as their ticket of entry into class for the day. It becomes a record for the teacher for record-keeping purposes of absences or tardies or things like that. Now, you see in the right-hand photo, there is a badge, and I happened to print my badge there as I ran my card through. That is a badge that is also produced by Raptor. It's a self-adhesive label. And this is what would be issued to any visitor or to any volunteer that enters the building. They are wearing these badges while they're in the building, so they are easily identified as having been approved to be in the building. Our staff knows that if a person they don't recognize does not have a badge, that they are supposed to actually contact that person, stop and talk to them, and find out what their purposes are and whether or not they've actually checked into the office. We use this for, again, for all of our visitors as well as our volunteers within the school. We also use the Raptor system when it comes to volunteer drivers for field trips. While that person may not necessarily be in our building, we do know that they are going to be having contact with our students. So not only do we go ahead and scan the driver's license of all of our volunteer field trip drivers or chaperones for any event, we will take that information, make sure that they are okay to actually be with the children. Now, Raptor does not scan their information for valid insurance. It is actually one of the policies that we have, that before parents actually take or drive students on a field trip or other event, that we do have a record of their valid insurance so that we know students riding with them are in a vehicle that is insured in the unfortunate event of an accident. Other things that we do for people that are with us in the building is that we also perform background checks. I think that's probably a given across the world in terms of people who have access to the students. And one of the things that we use is something called iChat. In Michigan, that's a quick feature that we have. iChat is something that is a very quick, statewide only background check for known felons or sex offenders. It's what we keep on file for our school volunteers. However, our staff on a deeper level does have to complete a state and federal background check. And of course, one of the things though that many schools may not know about is that actually only certified personnel within your school building, people that have actually been trained, do need to be the ones that handle that information, store that information, and have access to that information. I myself am not a person who is certified, who's had that training. Therefore, I cannot access that information. I do have to go through our office manager to be able to gain that information. So those are just a few things that we do in terms of our visitors and our staff in the building. Again, I think many of those technologies or many of those procedures are in place at most schools, but hopefully something here provides some interest for some of you and hopefully proves to be a useful technology. When we take a look at school safety, there are many things that we do here at Peace Lutheran in terms of maintenance. And that's not just making sure light bulbs aren't burned out or that doors are working properly, but we also take a look for hazards around the building, around the grounds, that may be items that could cause an injury or some other type of safety concern. On a frequent basis, we are walking the grounds, walking the facilities, taking a look at things like trip hazards. These are items I think that are often overlooked on our school grounds across the country in terms of trip hazards on sidewalks, or maybe walking up to the front door. Those are items that if we know of them and they meet a certain criteria, we address those trip hazards. We also take a look at our landscaping, not just in the sense that everything is neat and trimmed, although I will say that having a tidy and well-kept building is in fact an item we think is a deterrent to some people in terms of whether or not they see opportunity at a school, how well it's maintained or taken care of. But we also take a look at things with landscaping in terms of whether or not tree branches may be low hanging, trees ready to fall over. Are our bushes trimmed low enough below the windows so that you can easily see in or see people hiding behind them? Oftentimes you hear these things with local authorities as they talk to homeowners about making sure their homes are kept as safe as they possibly can be. In the Midwest here, and especially in Saginaw, we've had our first snow of the year, and one of the things that I think we all assume is that snow must be removed and the walks kept safe. But one of the things that we take a step further is not only removing snow and ice and the use of ice melt and things like that, we also make sure that we are documenting when that is done, how much product is put down, and what areas were addressed. This is more to cover our backsides if in the event that someone may ever get hurt due to a slip and fall accident. We've got documentation of how frequently and when places were actually treated. And that covers us legally then. If you see in the right-hand corner here, fire extinguishers, all schools should be equipped with fire extinguishers. I think that's a given. One of the things I don't think, though, that oftentimes get checked is whether or not those fire extinguishers are actually in working order. One of the things that hopefully most schools have done is already contracted with a local company to make sure that annual fire extinguisher maintenance is happening. But if you as administrators or trustees take a walk through your building, take a look, because every fire extinguisher should have a maintenance tag on it. Take a look at that tag. And on the back of that tag is, month by month, a place for a person to be checking that that extinguisher has been checked monthly and that a little bit of maintenance has been done with that extinguisher. I can tell you I've walked into many, many, many schools, and it is not uncommon for me to find those extinguishers not being marked as having been checked on a monthly basis. And it's also apparently not very, well, I should say it is somewhat common too to find that there are extinguishers in buildings I've been in that have been found in non-working order. Those are things that should be checked on a monthly basis by your staff or trustees, just little items that I think often are overlooked by schools. Lights. Lights are actually emergency equipment. And I would think that in most schools, you have lights attached to your emergency exit signs. Those lights need to be checked on a monthly basis to make sure they're functioning properly. In addition to that, some schools may be outfitted with emergency backup lights. Those are also things that need to be checked on a monthly basis. If in fact you're unsure about this, ask your custodian, ask your trustee, whoever's in charge of that. Hey, do you know where these lights are? Can you throw the breaker? Let's see if these lights come on. I think you might be surprised as to how many of those lights are not actually working the way they're supposed to be. Most schools today also have AEDs. One of the things I have also found, unfortunately, in many schools I've been in, is that while the schools have AEDs, when I visit schools, I will go to the AED or the cabinet where it's located, and I'll actually open it, turn on the AED, and find out it doesn't work because the batteries have not been tested on a monthly basis. The electrodes that are within the AEDs may not necessarily be up to date and they are expired. And yes, that's something we found out. The electrodes do expire even if you don't use them. Those are some things that should be checked on, and I'll get into a little bit more about that later. First aid kits. I think most classrooms do have some sense of first aid kits, and if not, your main office. And that's another item too, is our monthly or yearly checks of those first aid kits to make sure that they're fully stocked actually being done. Taking a look then too, something else. Other maintenance items. OSHA, I think many people are aware of OSHA. OSHA is a federal group that oversees the safety of all public buildings. And in terms of things that OSHA requires, something you may not know, is to inspect your ladders on a frequent basis, and also to make sure that there is training being done on how to properly use ladders. That's something that we have done here at Peace, is make sure that we've inspected our ladders to make sure that they are safe and sound, and also train staff, because the way you maybe learn to use a ladder when you're growing up is not necessarily the most safe thing to do. In the picture here, you see a yellow book attached to a wall, a little cradle. And if any of you recognize that, you'll know that those are, that book contains safety data sheets, formerly known as MSDS sheets. What those sheets are is a record of every material that could be ingested, inhaled, or cause some type of a health reaction to exposure to that product. Not only is that sheet there also to document that product, it has all of the procedures in it of how to treat a person that may be adversely affected by that product. Now, people normally think that those types of sheets are more for your powerful chemicals, maybe your floor strippers or very strong cleaning products. But in actuality, we found that right down to things as seemingly harmless as excuse me, as whiteout or Elmer's glue, things like that do need to be documented in your safety data sheet book. We have these books posted all around the building in key locations, not only in public areas where people have access to them, but also in the offices and custodial closets. Oftentimes, as I've looked around school buildings, these are nowhere to be found. And people actually have asked me, safety data what? MS what? It's something I think that schools often overlook, not necessarily because the custodian seemingly already knows what to do, but I think people don't realize it may be something as simple as sanitizer that a child was exposed to and is having a reaction to. Those items should be put in your safety data sheet book, and again, you should have several copies of that available in key locations around the school with a master safety data sheet book located in your office. It needs to be posted, and something, again, is an OSHA item that you have these available. Went to an OSHA seminar once upon a time, and the person giving this seminar was an OSHA inspector. And one of the things that this OSHA inspector said to me is, you do not want me in your building. And if I am in your building, you don't want me to get past the front office. He said there are a couple of ways to keep an OSHA inspector from really getting past your front office. And again, not that it's a bad thing to have OSHA in your building, but there may be things that when OSHA is in your building, they're going to find, can write you up for, and do have the ability to shut down your school immediately. This is one of those items, having your safety data sheets there, making sure that they're updated annually or as soon as you take in a new product to your building. Another item that this OSHA inspector said that he immediately looks for is he goes to the first fire extinguisher and he looks at the first tag on the fire extinguisher, looks to see if anyone's been maintaining it. And not necessarily that that's an indicator, man, everything's bad here, but is an indicator to that inspector, at least that particular inspector, that said, maybe I should dig a little bit deeper into this building. The other item, which isn't necessarily completely safety related, is this inspector said, I also take a look at your first public restroom. And if I take a look at your first public restroom and find it's in sad shape, he says that is also a key for me that I need to take probably a little bit closer look at the rest of your building. I am not an OSHA expert by any means, but there are things that I've picked up along the way that I found we need to be doing better here at our school, and having been in other schools, realized these schools are behind on at least a few of the things that we know about in terms of being prepared in this regard. Some other items here too in terms of maintenance. HVAC items. Again, most schools either have a group of trustees that handle these items. They may also have a custodian that handle these, or they may contract with a company that handles a lot of their HVAC items. In addition to making sure that you do annual maintenance on them, belts and filters and things like that, you think that's just routine maintenance. But one of the things that I've heard of across the country, that schools have small fires here or small fires there. And oftentimes those are because filters had not been replaced and units overheated. Belts were not adjusted and started small fires in the units. It is a good idea to make sure that at least your custodian or trustee is doing those belts and filters and checks at least on a seasonal basis by use, and documenting that information as well. Another item here too is something called CSD1s. And if you're not familiar with that, those are combustion safety device. Those are the items on your boilers, on your water heaters, that make sure that if it starts functioning improperly, that it's not going to blow up, cause a fire, or some other safety hazard concern. It is imperative and it is required, and if you don't know about it, that your boilers have annual CSD1 testings, and those have to be done by a licensed HVAC technician. But little known is that you do have to post those in your boiler room or mechanical rooms somewhere where they can be seen. So in that far right hand picture, you see that we make sure that those are posted, as well as the little blue signs on the bottom. Those are our state boiler licenses. Again, your boilers in your building, and water heaters are included in those, do have to be licensed on a periodic basis by your state. Now in Michigan, we do have to make sure that we post those along with our CSD1s. And I'll tell you, as our local fire inspector does an annual visit of our building, that is one of the things that he looks for every time. Do you have them posted? If not, he writes us up on it. If we do, you get the pat on the back, and there you go. But if you notice here that emergency shutdowns and remote access for controls is something we've got listed. In the left-hand picture, you notice that there are two push buttons. These push buttons we had installed, and actually today I believe it is national code that when a new installation of a boiler or other device is put in, that you do have these emergency shutdowns. Here at Peace Lutheran, we are located very near some railroad tracks. And in our area of the country, we have Dow Chemical that is located close by. And we have on a daily basis what we've come to affectionately known as the death trains traveling back and forth to Dow Chemical. These trains carry some very, very hazardous materials on their way for processing. One of the things that we install with our boilers is also a shutdown for all of our rooftop equipment that brings air into the building, cools our rooms, and things like that. In the event of a derailment or some other emergency, we install these devices so that staff knows exactly if we get notification or something just doesn't seem right. They hit the panic button and all of those systems are shut down to avoid further hazards to everybody inside. One of the items I have posted in the bottom here is with water heaters. And we found this out recently, is that our state started requiring us to make sure that our water heaters were also tested and checked on an annual basis. Water heaters are very, very dangerous items. In the event that they do continue heating and boil, they can explode. And they are just as destructive as any other type of bomb that you could put in a building. Again, document all these things, which I think oftentimes schools may or may not do, but post them as well. It's good practice. Items here I think most schools probably are more familiar with is inspecting playground equipment. And at Peace, we do an annual inspection of our playground equipment. And that really does entail more than just, are all the swings actually there? It entails going through every single nut, bolt, screw, and chain link and inspecting it for wear, tightness, and making sure that it is has much integrity to it for the safety of students. Playgrounds really do need to make sure you think about, should you or should you not have a fence around your playground? Obviously, the closer to the road you are, you would probably want to consider having a fence around your playground. If you're in a very densely populated area or an urban area, you may want to consider having a fence if you don't already, to keep people from just wandering into the playground. You also want to take a look at your fill material. I think most playgrounds also have wood chips in them. And over time, those wood chips do break down, they do compact. And the whole purpose of wood chips is to cushion the ground to make sure that if someone does fall, there is a soft or semi-soft landing. Oftentimes this gets overlooked underneath swings and slides. This is something you do need to inspect and correct if needed to make sure that you have the proper amount of material and that it has not become compacted as well. Trip hazards are another thing. And then of course, finally looking at your structures. Are they structurally sound? Do you have any cracks in your slides? Are any of the handrails coming loose? Are all the ropes in good condition? The last thing you want is to have someone come to you and say, a student on the playground fell when this rope broke. Getting around to first aid, CPR, AED, and also trauma, things that we often think of as safety items. Some things that we do here at Peace, and I would guess that most schools do across the country, is that every 1 or 2 years we have training, and that's based on our state requirements to make sure that people do have up-to-date CPR, first aid, AED training. Our early childhood department, our state mandates that that is done on a yearly basis. We include our custodial staff on that as well as our volunteers to make sure that in the event of staff not being around, they can also respond to that. One of the things I think most insurance companies require or ask of their schools is that you document all of your injuries, even as small as I happen to stab myself with a pencil or a bee sting. There are forms that your insurance company will provide you with in order to document that. It's not necessarily something you need to turn in to the company, but something good to have on file to make sure you do have a record of what, when, and how it was treated. In the state of Michigan, our government requires us to document and post all of our drills. In the state of Michigan, of course, we have a minimum of 5 fire drills that we practice on a year. In addition to that, we have at least 2 tornado drills that we practice over the course of the year. And lastly, we have at least 3 safety or security drills that we practice. One of them has to be a lockdown drill. Again, our state requires that we not only document that, but we also post it to our website. If your state doesn't require that, it still is, or it's something good to consider as a good practice to at least let your parents know we are doing these things and it's not just lip service. You can actually see. Now, certainly you do not ever want to post when these drills will be taking place. The last thing you want to do is to expose the kids and staff to public knowledge of them being outside the building and in a vulnerable position. One of the things that we do here too is that we have quizzes for our staff. In a faculty meeting, it is simply a matter of picking an item out of our policies and procedures for responding to these items and quizzing them on it. It's amazing to find out how quickly they can get information crossed up. And it is a good opportunity to correct that information, to get staff thinking, and to get staff prepared to answer those questions. We did talk about making sure that first aid and trauma kits are checked yearly, making sure that the inventory is adequate. And yes, I do have first aid and trauma kits because any of you that do know, first aid kits and trauma kits are 2 very different things. They can be combined together into one, but trauma kits have more to do with your tourniquets and items used for mass or massive traumas, such as limbs that may be severely severed or gunshot wounds. Those things and those items in there for treating that are very different from your regular old first aid kits. And then, of course, we talked about checking your AED monthly, making sure that you have the correct batteries, making sure that they are working properly, they turn on, and that also you have up-to-date electrodes in them. As we take a look at our electrodes and they expire, we make sure that we go ahead and store those electrodes for possible use in the future. We have a neat app that we use in terms of documenting this. This system here helps notify me it's time for a monthly check, and we do actually have to do some type of maintenance, whether it's pads, electrodes, batteries, and things like that. We've gotten that before. I'm moving backwards. Some more policies and procedures, safety items here. We do staff training for all crisis events, and these are not just shootings. One of the first things we teach staff to do is to be observant. And that is probably the biggest thing you can teach your staff to do, is how to be observant, not just in the building, but on the playground and when they're not on duty. Those things are extremely helpful in avoiding any serious things going on. If people know that you are watching, you have a less likely opportunity of somebody trying something at your school campus. The next thing we talk about with our staff is communication, not just with each other, but how to communicate with local authorities, especially our central dispatch. All of our staff is taught, if you don't know, you can't get in touch, and when you're in doubt, call 911. It doesn't have to be just for an emergency, a fire. It can simply be for something suspicious going on. In terms of self-defense, something I think schools should all consider is weapons. And I'm not simply talking guns, talking any type of a weapon, and whether or not you train your staff to use them. I'm not necessarily advocating for schools to have weapons in them, but I think it is fair to ask schools to consider, what do we provide for staff? In addition to that, physical self-defense. Are you training your staff? We have found that our local law enforcement is always willing to come in, and they have come in to teach our staff basic self-defense. In addition to that, you've got your basic school response plans, which I believe most schools have. And in terms of getting that help, again, your first responders, whether it's police, fire, or EMS, are always willing to help you train with those things. But the thing is that we found out, policies are one thing, and that you have to practice, 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 physically practice to actually make those policies excuse me, and procedures truly effective when seconds count. Some things that we found here at our school that we needed to utilize and put in place have to do with student-specific safety. And what we found is that we do a lot of publishing of student photographs, whether it's in our local papers or on our school's Facebook page. There are instances where our students' parents do not want their pictures in the paper for a variety of reasons, or pictures to be out on the internet for a variety of reasons. And so what we do at the beginning of the year is we make sure that we get a parent permission slip for their child's photo to be publicized. If it's not there, every time that we have picture opportunities going on, staff is already aware of their own students to make sure that their pictures are not publicized. When it comes to medications, again, making sure that prescribed medications and over-the-counter medications, everything actually, is kept in the office. I think of the days when I was in school and everybody had cough drops, but this day and age when a lot of students have allergies, all of those items, whether prescribed or over the counter, we do keep here in our office, documented and kept under lock and key. At the end of the year, of course, making sure that there's safe return of those things to the parents, or if it's left at the end of the year, going to our local health department and disposing of all those medications instead of just flushing them down the toilet. But you also want to make sure that things like inhalers, EpiPens, or diabetic supplies, you do have a plan in place to keep those things constantly under lock and key, may prove fatal in some instances. So make sure that you have a plan in place for those special events.
Joel, this is Matt Schleicher, again, the host. I'd like to just, could you go back to that previous slide?
Sure thing.
Something that may be helpful as I work at a Lutheran high school building. And, you know, Peace is a Lutheran elementary school setting. One thing with photographs that may be helpful for those of you that might be taking in this webinar and you're from a high school, we actually have within our parent-student handbook a media release notification. It's a part of our again, handbook approach that says, you know, we are basically saying as a condition for your son or daughter being a student at this school and you in partnership with us, the school, we have the ability to use your son's or daughter's likeness, their photo, video, without, of course, notifying or labeling their last name, you know, maybe even potentially using a first name at times, but many times, certainly, of course, not using a last name. And I know you said that for you at Peace, being a Lutheran elementary school setting, your teachers know who in their classrooms, for instance, do not have the parent permission on file. So therefore, they're being mindful of those sorts of things. Lutheran high school, a little bit different because we don't have each student assigned to like a homeroom teacher. Just something to consider, those of you that are within Lutheran high school settings.
That's a very good point. And it's oftentimes one thing to publish a student's name, but we found, unfortunately, in some instances, that parents have been wanting to make sure that as maybe a disgruntled family member or a messy divorce situation, they are searching for the child and this parent is trying to remain hidden from that family member or other person. And they do know that that person is out there searching the internet looking for those children, and they know that even the simple image of their child could compromise the location and safety of their child, which is why we've gone that step further to not even publish the photo.
Very good. Yeah, very good point. So thank you. I just wanted to throw one more thing out there for other settings to consider. So very good. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Matt. Getting on the lighting here, I think it's a given that you should be making that sure that all of your lights are working. They are adequate. You do have your public spaces well lit inside and out. One of the things people often don't think about is that over time, lights do dim down. And even though the light may be lit, it may not be adequate for the space. Making sure that your after hours lighting is adequate for people for safe passage through the parking lots and sidewalks, but also making sure that you have adequate lighting in spaces that aren't public spaces. That may be an opportunity for someone to come in and to have access to your building under the cover of darkness. Getting back to these egress lights and exit lights in your buildings, one of the things that's really required is that you are doing a monthly rundown, at least 90 minutes of these exit lights and egress lights, And we have actually come to find out that while they may have been working for a quick test, they really do not last more than 10 minutes. That's our indicator. We definitely need to make sure that we've got those batteries maintained, changed if needed, replacing burned out lights. And again, in our case, this is something that our local fire marshal will ask for when he does his annual visit. Show me the document that you've tested these lights on a monthly basis and that you've been conducting these rundowns. Each school is different in terms of their procedures for parking lots. It's something good, if you haven't already thought of it, to not only let staff know of what the procedure is, but also in some type of before school meetings or some publication to parents to let them know, here's how we do drop off, here's how we do pickup. In terms of our school drop off, we have a student safety patrol who, as students pull up in their vehicles or their parents pull up, we have those safety patrol people opening the car doors for those students, making sure they get out safely, and making sure that as they are traversing the sidewalks to the building, that they're not inadvertently walking out into the path of a car. We found on more than one occasion where having a student safety patrol person there has helped avoid actual incidences of students wandering into the path of a car. We've had some students who got out of the car seemingly safely, shut the door, but the strap of their backpack was actually stuck in the door and the parent began to pull off. Thank God that safety patrol member was there to quickly yell, shout, knock on the door to stop the parent from pulling away with their student still attached to the car. Pickup for us is also staff observed, making sure that students are safely making it to their cars, also making sure that parents are doing what they're supposed to be doing and not doing what they're not supposed to be doing in that parking lot. And then, of course, with our drills, again, document those drills. Document, document, document. Not necessarily for just state purposes or local purposes, but also for your stakeholder purposes. We are doing these things. It's also a good level of accountability for yourself as a school. One of the things we do, make sure that we do, is don't announce them to the parents at all. And very rarely will we announce them to our staff. The last thing that we often want to do, or that we don't want to do, is let staff get into a comfortable groove. Oh yes, we know it's coming and it's business as usual. We want this to be unplanned. One of the few times that we'll make an allowance is if we do have a student with special needs, making sure that the teacher is aware so that that student isn't adversely affected by the fire alarm. But that's done on a very, very rare case. We already spoke about visitors, so those are some items there too. Again, want to reiterate with your schools that you're making sure that you do. I've mentioned it before with local law enforcement and fire in terms of training. One of the things that we do here at Peace is that we invite our resource officers or fire marshals to come through and we ask them, please give us feedback, please be hard on us. We want to make sure we're as good as we possibly can do. In addition to that, we invite them to come when we're doing fire drills, when we're doing tornado drills, when we're doing lockdown drills. We want their feedback on how we're doing our drills. Are they effective? Do they have any suggestions for doing things better? But one of the other things that we've done, and I haven't heard of too many schools doing this, is that we actually offer invitations, and we do have our first responders take us up on it. We do have them actually bring shifts of police, road patrols, of fire departments, and bringing their whole unit through our building. And that is just to help them become familiar with our building. They have many buildings they service, and they're not all the same. And the response from our first responders is that they love being able to walk through our building so they have a sense of knowing where things are. We also have a neat app that we use. It comes from ServPro, which is a disaster cleanup company or disaster response company. And what they have done is they've come in for free and documented everything in our building related to emergency shutoffs, where valves are, where these items are located. And we share that app with our first responders so that they know when they come to the building, yeah, I've been here before, but I don't remember where this is. They pull up the app. and they're able to find out all of our emergency contacts after hours and during hours, as well as where certain things are in the building that really pertain to what they're there for. Other things, these local law enforcement agencies here, at least in our area, have access to a lot of grant opportunities. And in terms of finding that money, they can point us to this. Sometimes they have their own grants and they say, we like what you're doing. We know what you want to do. We can provide you the source to apply, or you can apply directly to us. Communication is key with them. And the more frequently that you invite them into their building, even if it's a single person or representative, that communication is there, because in critical minutes, you want somebody who is already familiar with you and can help you be that liaison with first responders. We also take a look, and we have done at our school, active shooter trainings and actually cardiac emergency drills. The active shooter trainings we've done without students in the building. We've done just with staff in the building, and it went through a live event where our local police worked with us, and we had SWAT and everybody else visiting. Those are, again, good ideas, not only for them to get practice and familiar with our building, but for us as staff to understand what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. And we've had staff respond that they never knew it would be that intense. It gets them to think with a different part of their brain. The cardiac emergency drills, it's one thing to have first aid and CPR and AED practice, but if you never have a chance to drill, again, it's just one time a year. So we've conducted cardiac emergency drills here, again, not with students in the building, but we've had a drill where our local EMS came out, staged an emergency, and required staff to come and conduct all of their training and use it in that particular event. Again, staff said that was way different than our first aid and CPR training, and very valuable. Some other items here in terms of our school closings. I think most administrators are aware they do need to notify their families and media and things like that, but oftentimes it's overlooked for snow removal. It's helpful to those companies to know when I should be having and snow removal and when not. I would also suggest that if schools don't do it already, they look into different types of technologies that administrators can make one phone call, and there is a repetitive phone call or a phone tree, an automated phone tree that goes out from there. We do a couple different things here. We use a technology called Bright Arrow. It's an instant notification for our school families. All of them get phone calls. We do use our SMS system, Jupiter Grades, to also put out an email to our parents, and we do also post it on our school's Facebook page. Not only for things just like school closings, but in the event of emergencies, those communication tools are critical so you're not flooded with phone calls. In terms of crisis management, again, crisis management is not always violence, but some of the things that we do to prepare for that. In our school office, we do have a crisis management box, which you see pictured in the left-hand picture there, sometimes known as a go box. And inside that go box, we have all staff contacts and health information. We have a master set of keys. We have a set of maps for the building, and we have all of our student class lists and student informations. In the event that we do have a crisis here and those first responders are on site, we don't have to quickly scrounge around for all this information. They simply know to grab the box, and as they do their emergency management, all that information is right there. Pictured on the right there, you see our first aid and trauma kits in every classroom. And in terms of that, we also have, you see it's labeled all clear. That book has all of our procedures and policies. Again, we tell staff, you will not have time to read through this, but in the event that you're wondering, this is how we do it. And for quick reference, it's also there for our teachers. They take those cards outside with them, those books, and they use it to signal outside when we are outside the building for a drill. Is everything good? On the back side of those, it has a red card that says need help. Those are quick, nonverbal ways for teachers to communicate if they need help or if we can move on to the next person. Some things I think that schools may not have considered is developing a chain of command within your school. In the event that the principal is not around, who's next in charge? If the principal's not there and the administrator and the assistant principal's not there, who's next in charge? And in terms of media, of course, if you any event, the media is going to be right there. Who speaks to the media? If media happen to approach staff or students, what's their response supposed to be? Those are all policies and procedures we've put in place to make sure if anything does happen, who's in charge, how does it go, not only for us as a staff, but for first responders to know who do they go to. Another thing that we've done is created reciprocal agreements for extended evacuation safe havens. In the event that we are outside, out of the building for an emergency reason, and it happens to be an extended period of time, and we have inclement weather, we need a place to keep all of these students safe and warm and out of the elements. So we have made sure that we've partnered with local groups, such as a nursing home close by. We happen to have a fire station across the street that's pretty convenient for us, but those are places that we have already said, in the event that we are outside and we need a place to go or a meeting point, can we meet at your site? They have agreed to that, and it's reciprocal. If they have that same thing, they know they can come to our place. So take a look for any local entity around you, whether it be a restaurant or another school. See if you can find an extended evacuation safe haven in that event that you're outside for a long period of time. One of the things we are looking at is an app that has all of our policies and procedures in it. They are quite pricey, but one of the things we'd like to do is to make this possible for all of our procedures and responses and communication, an app for all of our staff to have so that they can simply open this app and get up-to-date communications, status, and have all of their policies and procedures in place. They are out there. The company that does make our emergency response books that you see in the picture does offer that service. And then, of course, if your school doesn't have a public address system, you may want to consider it. It's great for in-house communication instead of having to run through the hallways and yell. It's a good idea to have something like that in place. If not, you should have a system where you can quickly go throughout your school with a couple of people and relay emergency information. Of course, when doing all of this, I said before, I'm not an expert in this. However, I've learned that there are lots of experts around me. And so I've done a lot of communication with our local law enforcement, with state experts, even with federal experts. We've communicated with our vendors, and importantly, tier 2, stakeholders are a valuable group of people to reach out to. We found within our school, we have a lot of resources in being prepared for different types of emergency situations and taking a look at just making sure our school is safe as it can be. When you're going through all this here, as I think I mentioned at the beginning, it's one thing to make policies and procedures, but if you do not get support from your staff, you're dead in the water, so to speak. So as you're developing all this, you do want to make sure that at the beginning and during all of this, that you're seeking out your staff's input. They may see things that you never recognized. But I also found that it's important for us to seek out parent and student input. Just be very careful with that because they'll come up with anything and everything. You'll have to sift through that. There's good information in what they offer. However, some of it just can't be implemented. In the end, you're going to take all that information and you're going to formulate that plan with all of your key stakeholders. And in the end, someone inevitably will find a hole in your system you just can't manage. They will have a problem with safety and security. That's one of the issues we find the most is people complain about how inconvenient things seem to be with safety and security in terms of their free movement in and out of the building. And our response in a polite way and with a smile is to simply come back and say, I hear what you're saying. Right now, though, there's nothing more important to us than the safety and spiritual care of our students. And this is what we found that works. If you've got a great suggestion for us that works, and maybe we can find a way that's working, we'd be glad to hear it. But right now, what we're doing is for the safety and care of our students as well as our staff. That's a go-to line for me quite frequently, and it seems to have calmed a lot of the fears, in addition to explaining sometimes why we do what we do. And then, of course, what wouldn't we would be remiss if we didn't mention that funding is a huge part sometimes of safety and security at schools. Peace has taken a lot of look at federal, state, and local, even local foundations for grant monies. And we've been able to secure a lot of money for these things through these different entities. They are out there. And it takes a lot of legwork on the part of the administrator or this team to take a look through at these opportunities. Again, your local law enforcement, your local first responders can help direct you to where these are. And I will tell you, the amount that's in there, even if it's in the public school realm, it does, at least in our state, still qualify for even non-public schools. We've also had stakeholders, as we advertise the need for safety and security, we found that our stakeholders realize when we tell people this is for the safety of our students, a lot of our stakeholders have said, I'd be willing to help out with funding. Let me know what I can do. In addition to not just out-of-pocket things, they can also help organize those fundraising events for you for raising funds for safety and security items. Now, the last couple slides here, safety items that we are still looking at, things we know about, we don't necessarily have, but we're taking a look at. And again, these things, of course, are coming from our local law enforcement. I think cameras is one that everybody thinks about. But I think the thing with cameras most people may not realize is that with camera systems today, you can get remote access to those cameras. Not only beneficial for you as administrators after hours wanting to find out what's going on and what that alarm actually is at 3 o'clock in the morning and whether or not you actually have to go down there. But I'll tell you that we found out with the systems that are out there now, they have apps. And we've already talked with local police that when we are able to get these systems, they would absolutely love to have these apps that allow them to remote into our camera system to be able to find out what actually is going on in the building, whether it's after hours or during hours. It also helps them if we ever have an event that local police can say, that's what exactly happened. We knew something was going on, we just didn't know what. But something also to consider, not only around your building, but also make sure that you can monitor your parking lot entrances and exits. And this is more in the case of any type of vandalism that may have occurred after hours. How did that person get there? What kind of vehicle are in? Can they catch a license plate? We've also considered too, in the unfortunate event of an abduction, do we have a description of a vehicle to give to local authorities and state authorities? Those are some things to consider when you get your cameras. Another one recently here is, and maybe not so recently, but is a bullet-resistant window film. This is not completely bullet-proof window film, but this is bullet-resistant. It will not stop the bullets in terms of a high-caliber round. It will stop small arms fire. But what that film actually does is when you put it on key windows, it actually prolongs the time to shoot out a window or break out that window. Why is that important? Well, because a person can walk up to a locked door, but most of our doors have windows in them, and it's real easy to shoot out a window and just keep walking right through. This bullet-resistant film does not allow the window to shatter. And actually, if you watch some of the videos that are out there, it takes up to 5 and 10 minutes for a person to finally break through, if ever. That 3 to 5 to 10 minutes is just enough time for local authorities to respond and deal with the crisis. So that's something else that we're taking a look at. A couple companies that make that are School Guard Glass, 3M makes that. There are other vendors that are out there. Again, something if you're looking for a grant opportunity, that might be something that you look at. Another one that our local authorities have offered to us is something with window obscuring film. Your school, if you may not realize it or not, but when a person sits in your parking lot, and you may try this as an administrator, when I'm in the parking lot, can I sit there and watch movement of students throughout the building? Can I see them through the windows? Can I see them in the classrooms? You may have shades in the classroom, but if a teacher's got the shades open, can I be watching what's going on? A person can be sitting in a parking lot and observe all of these things and plot and plan. One of the things our local authorities advised us is to take a look at some perforated window film that you apply to the outside of your glass. What this does is it allows light to pass through and students to see out the window, but a person from the outside cannot monitor what's going on inside the building. An example of this is if you've ever seen a public transportation bus and they've got all of the billboards on the side of the bus that cover up the windows. If you've ever ridden on those buses, you realize you can still see out the window, but people on the outside can't really see in the window. So those are some items that we know are good items for us to consider, considering the proximity of the parking lot to our building and what you can and can't see, and something that we hope to embark on in the future. My final thoughts here as I wrap up tonight. Number one, if you have the mindset that there's nothing more important than the safety of staff and students, let that one be your guiding light in all of this. That's my mantra as I consider what do we need to do next. That one keeps coming back to mind. It comes back to mind when people complain about the security around our building or staff and all the procedures that we have to do. Second thing here, be very aggressive in implementation, but be aware what oppressive looks like. That goes back to understanding the difference between what works and what really inhibits the actual operation of the school. Understand the difference between being aggressive and doing what you need to do, but what oppressive actually becomes. Security and safety items are never, ever a one and done thing. If you think we've got these nice little procedures, we've got these booklets in our building, and we've done this once, and yet we did it a couple years ago, you're out of date. Immediately, the moment you put all these things into place, you are out of date. It's something that needs to be done on an annual basis. Again, this does not have to fall completely on the shoulders of the administrator. It's something that you can work with trustees on, local law enforcement, or even a group of staff that says we have that passion and they want to work with you on facilitating that. Practice makes perfect. Practice makes printed policies and procedures work. And if you don't physically practice, everything just about is useless. You have to practice. Make it part of your routine as a staff, as a school. Second to last, be willing to admit that something isn't working. It might be your brainchild, it might be your baby, but if it isn't working, it's not helping anybody. And at that point in time, it's only your pride that you're serving. This has been something for me that I thought was a great idea and it wasn't working. In those instances, I had to get over that and realize it wasn't the best for our school and be willing to go back and take a look at something better or just deleting that practice altogether. And lastly here, always be ready to investigate something new. I've had some things presented to me as ideas. Probably the dangerous part of that is to downplay it, to dismiss it, say, no, we could never. That's a dangerous place to get into. It doesn't mean do everything new. It just means always be ready to investigate something new. So with that, I've got a couple things here as I wrap up. In the end here, we have many more things that I just didn't want to pile on here. Some of these items are sensitive because they are specific to our school, and we just don't document and put everything out for God and country to see. So if you are particularly interested in more information about what we do or policies and procedures, absolutely please reach out to me. My email is listed there. We're at Peace Lutheran School and Early Childhood Center in Saginaw, Michigan. I have listed here several vendors that we use. Electromatic is Visual, is a company out of Michigan we use, and they tailor our lighting to our building. ServPro is the company we use for the app to document for our first responders where all emergency shutoffs and locations are around the building. Guest Communications is the group that helped us to put together our policies and procedures books, our quick reference charts in our classrooms. They're also the ones that offer the electronic app to take all those policies and procedures and put them into an electronic form for quick reference. SecuriKey is the company we happen to use for building access with fobs and passcodes. We did use A-phone products for our intercom systems around the building. Aventric Technologies is a company that we use for our AEDs. They also have HART AED, which is that electronic program which helps us to document and monitor our AEDs in terms of any type of service or maintenance that needs to be done. And then lastly here is Raptor Technologies. Raptor Technologies is the company that produces that hardware and software, that information system that can be used to screen your visitors, your staff, your students, and all those people that visit your building, making sure you know what kind of person, or at least on a good level, what kind of person is coming into your building, whether or not they're safe to be there. I will tell you about all of these groups. None of them have paid me for any type of recognition here or any sales pitch. That's not what it is. It's just a quick reference for you. I will also tell you that these are not the only companies in the country that do this stuff. As I've searched, there are multiple countries, multiple businesses that do offer these items, these services. So I invite you to surf the internet, reach out to local vendors, local law enforcement know of people like this too. So with that, I don't have any more information. Matt, are there things that you'd like to take as follow-up questions? Any questions we should answer that I've missed here? Or just in general, do we need to wrap up?
Yeah, I think we probably need to wrap, just given our time. But just again, once again, we thank you, Joel Coip from Peace Lutheran School in Saginaw, Michigan, for your very insightful presentation, very thorough, very comprehensive presentation. We also again want to thank our friends from Concordia, Wisconsin, for their help in producing this webinar. The next Powerful Practice webinar will be presented on January 14th, 2020. And it'll be highlighting the powerful practice from Open Arms Lutheran Child Development Center in Alpharetta, Georgia. And the title for that particular webinar is Staff Position Focused on Faith Development. So be looking for more information on that particular webinar and other upcoming webinars in the near future. God's blessings to you all as you continue to serve our Savior as professional educators in Lutheran schools. Again, Joel Coip, on behalf of representing Peace Lutheran School, thank you so much for your time and expertise that you've shared with us this evening. And this now concludes this particular NLSA Powerful Practice webinar. Have a good evening.